Retirement feels like the moment the clock starts ticking backwards. No more paycheck, no more security, just watching your savings slowly drain year after year until there's nothing left. At least that's what everyone's been told. That's the story that keeps people working longer than they need to, staying in jobs they hate because they're terrified of running out. But here's the part that almost no one talks about. For a surprising number of people, retirement doesn't drain their wealth. It actually grows it, sometimes a little, sometimes dramatically, and once you understand why, everything about retirement planning starts to look completely different. If this sounds impossible, stay with me, because the data behind this is going to change how you think about your future. And if you're here because you're serious about understanding how money actually works, not just how financial fear works, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel cuts through the panic and shows you what the numbers really say. Let's start with the rule everyone's heard but almost no one actually understands, the 4% rule. The idea is dead simple. If you retire with $1 million and you withdraw 4% every year, adjusted for inflation, your money should last at least 30 years, maybe longer. That rule didn't come from nowhere. It was built by testing decades of real market history. The Great Depression, the 1970s stagflation nightmare, the 2008 crash, every brutal scenario you can imagine. And the rule still held. But here's what almost no one realizes. That 4% number is a worst-case survival rule. It's not the average outcome. It's the floor. The economist who helped create this rule later said that under normal market conditions, retirees could often safely withdraw closer to 5% or even more. The 4% figure was deliberately conservative, built to survive disaster, not to describe what usually happens. And yet, even that rule doesn't explain the real mystery. Why do so many retirees end up with more money than they started with? The answer isn't in the withdrawal rate. It's in something most people completely misunderstand. Spending. Everyone imagines retirement as this explosion of expenses, endless travel, fancy dinners every week, a packed social calendar, medical bills spiraling out of control. That fear is what convinces people they need $2 million, $3 million, $5 million just to survive. But actual retirees tell a very different story, and the data backs it up. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average household aged 65 to 74 spends around $65,000 per year. But once people hit 75 and older, that number drops to about $53,000. That's a reduction of more than $12,000 annually. Almost a 20% decline, not because they're forced to cut back, not because they're suffering, but because their preferences naturally change. Zoom out even further and the pattern becomes crystal clear. The average U.S. household, all ages combined, spends around $77,000 per year. Retirees spend far less than that. So what's happening here? Why does spending fall so consistently? Travel is a huge part of it. Most retirees travel heavily at first. The honeymoon phase, bucket list trips, seeing the world while they still can. But over time, something shifts, energy levels change, long flights stop being exciting and start feeling exhausting. Packing becomes a chore, airport security becomes unbearable, and sleeping in your own bed starts to sound better than any hotel. The desire to travel doesn't disappear completely. It just becomes more selective. Shorter trips, closer destinations, less frequent. Entertainment spending follows the same arc. Early retirement might mean dining out more, going to shows, staying active and social. But as years pass, routines naturally simplify. People cook more at home. They go out less. Not because they can't afford it, but because they prefer it. The activities that felt exciting at 65 feel exhausting at 75, and spending drops accordingly. Transportation costs fall sharply too. No more daily commute, no more sitting in traffic burning gas. Often couples go from 2 cars down to 1. Fewer miles driven means lower insurance, less maintenance, less fuel. It all adds up. Even healthcare, the category everyone is terrified of, usually doesn't outweigh all these other savings. Yes, medical expenses can rise, but on net, total spending tends to decline. Not because retirees are deprived, but because their lives naturally become simpler, quieter, and less expensive. Now layer in one more quiet but powerful force. Social Security. The average Social Security check is around $2,000 per month. For a married couple, that's roughly $48,000 per year. And that money shows up every single month, adjusted for inflation, guaranteed. It's not dependent on the stock market. It's not dependent on your portfolio performance. It just arrives. When you combine declining spending with that guaranteed income stream, something surprising happens. The amount retirees actually need to withdraw from their savings becomes far smaller than most people assume, and that's where the math starts working in reverse. Because once withdrawals are modest and spending is flexible, portfolios don't just survive. They often keep compounding, which means retirement isn't always the beginning of depletion. Sometimes it's the beginning of acceleration. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The famous 4% rule assumes something completely unrealistic, that retirees will spend the exact same amount, adjusted for inflation, every single year, no matter what's happening in the world. But let's be honest, humans don't behave like spreadsheets. Imagine this. You just retired last year. You're 6 months in. Then the stock market drops 35% in 5 weeks. Headlines are screaming. Your portfolio just lost a third of its value. Are you really going to book that $8,000 European vacation without hesitation? Are you really going to start that $25,000 kitchen renovation right now? Probably not. More likely you say, let's do a road trip this year instead. Or, we'll hold off on the remodel for now. Or, let's keep the old car one more year. Those tiny instinctive adjustments change everything. Retirement spending isn't a rigid line. It breathes, it flexes. When markets crash, people naturally tighten up. When markets are roaring, they loosen a little. That flexibility creates an enormous safety buffer that the 4% rule doesn't even account for. The rule is designed for a worst-case retiree who never adapts, who withdraws the same amount in 2008 as they did in 2006, no matter what. But real retirees aren't like that. They adapt constantly without even thinking about it. And here's where psychology quietly takes over. Most people enter retirement having spent 30 or 40 years saving, budgeting, delaying gratification. That mindset doesn't magically evaporate the day they stop working. In fact, many retirees end up underspending, not because they have to, but because it feels safer. Researchers even have a name for this phenomenon: the consumption gap. Retirees often could spend significantly more than they do, but they don't. They withdraw less than planned. They skip upgrades. They delay splurges. And while they're doing that, the rest of their portfolio stays invested, compounding quietly in the background. That's how net worth grows after retirement. Let's put real numbers to this. Imagine someone retires with $1 million. They plan to follow the 4% rule and withdraw $40,000 per year, plus they're getting Social Security. But in reality, their actual expenses turn out to be lower than expected. Social Security covers a big chunk. Their spending naturally declines. So instead of withdrawing $40,000, they only need to pull out $20,000. That's a 2% withdrawal rate. Meanwhile, the remaining $980,000 stays invested in a diversified portfolio that historically averages around 9 to 10% returns over the long term, even after inflation. That gap between what the portfolio earns and what they withdraw is powerful. 10 years later, that $1 million nest egg can easily be worth over $1.5 million, maybe even $2 million, while still providing income the entire time. That's not luck. That's not magic. That's just math combined with human behavior. And real estate quietly helps too. Most retirees own their homes outright or are very close to paying them off. Home values historically grow around 3 to 5% per year on average. That equity just sits there compounding in the background while actual living expenses decline. The house isn't generating cash flow, but it's building wealth silently. So when you add everything up, conservative withdrawal rules, naturally declining spending, Social Security income, and the human tendency to underspend out of caution, you get a result that feels completely backwards. Retirement doesn't drain wealth for many people. It amplifies it, slowly, quietly, consistently. Now let me be very clear about something. This doesn't apply to everyone. Some people retire with very little saved and genuinely struggle. Some face catastrophic health issues that force spending far higher than average. Some have no pension, limited Social Security, and no choice but to draw down aggressively. This isn't a universal guarantee, but for retirees who enter with even a modest nest egg, say $500,000 or more, the data consistently shows the same pattern. They're more likely to end retirement with more money than they started with. Not because they got lucky, but because the system is more forgiving than anyone admits. Which brings us to the real risk, the one almost no one talks about. It's not running out of money. It's being so terrified of running out that you never actually live, saving too much, spending too little, delaying joy indefinitely because you're convinced disaster is lurking around every corner. That's the trap. Retirement isn't just about survival math. It's about permission. Permission to enjoy what you've built without panic, without guilt, without constant fear. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The money you're hoarding to protect yourself might outlive you. And then what was it all for? There's a concept that doesn't get enough attention. The idea of dying with too much. People spend their entire lives accumulating, protecting, growing their wealth, convinced they need every dollar for some future emergency. And then they die at 85 with $2 million still in the bank. That money didn't give them security. It gave them anxiety. They could have traveled more, could have helped their kids or grandkids earlier when it mattered, could have donated to causes they cared about, could have lived bigger, fuller, richer lives, but they didn't because they were scared, and fear kept them small. So yes, strangely enough, many people don't get poorer after they retire. They get richer, their portfolios grow, their home equity grows, their net worth increases year after year even as they withdraw. But the real tragedy isn't financial, it's emotional. The biggest danger isn't losing your money. It's never giving yourself permission to use it. It's spending your entire retirement worrying about running out while the balance just keeps climbing. That's the irony. The safest financial outcome can sometimes be the saddest personal one. If this changed how you think about retirement, subscribe right now, because understanding how money actually works, not just how fear works, is the key to making better decisions. Drop a comment and tell me, are you worried about running out in retirement, or are you worried about not living enough while you still can? Let's talk about it. See you in the next one.